Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Films and Stuff podcast. I am the aptly named Ethan for today's episode, joined by the star of the show, Most Valuable Pete. Hey, Pete, what's up?
Not much, and this week for sure, even though I say it's never me, it's definitely you who's the star, because we're talking about your namesake, Ethan Hunt, in the Mission Impossible movie.
It's a big day. You know, I think we get particularly pumped when we get to review an absolute undeniable blockbuster, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And to be honest, they may come equally big, but they probably do not come bigger than Tom Cruise, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, right? This is kind of everything all at once. Summer blockbuster, Cruise, Mission Impossible, big franchise, and
lots of stunts.
And allegedly, I'm not sure if I believe it, the last one.
Allegedly. With a big grain of salt.
Yeah, I don't believe it.
I don't either.
But I do believe it's the last in this configuration. Let's go back to 30 years ago, right? The original Mission Impossible, where everyone was in this, I don't know what European city, under the cover of night. There was a double crossing. Ethan Hunt was sending all these emails from his America Online account, right? And we were introduced to Mission Impossible that led to, still to this day, not just in the series, but kind of like across all action movies, one of the more iconic images, which is Cruise dangling from that wire from the top of that ceiling in that computer bunker, right?
Yeah.
Comes full circle, and the guy who was the, I don't know, supposedly responsible for that server silo is back playing a relatively good cameo in this, huh? Kind of a nice callback. So let's go back to the scene. How excited were you for this movie, first of all?
So I was excited insofar as it's a Mission Impossible movie, and typically speaking, as we've come to expect of most Tom Cruise films, high action, lots of stunts. I don't know if they're complicated necessarily, but they're always fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so in that regard, I was excited.
Okay.
But on the other regard, this is a direct sequel to Dead Reckoning. And I wasn't so super keen on that film. I thought that it had the hallmarks of a Mission Impossible movie, sure, just like this does. But I just wasn't a huge fan of that film. And I think that hamstrings this one.
My excitement was relatively high, I have to say. I thought the first Dead Reckoning Part 1, I thought was actually very, very clever. And, you know, I think this originated kind of with, you know, the original Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, where Skynet was kind of like, at the time, kind of like an AI, even though we didn't look at it as an AI at the time. But it was a computer system that kind of like took over the world, right?
Right.
At the time, that was a very futuristic type problem. And I thought that, having watched so many James Bonds and Mission Impossibles, where there's always this kind of nefarious syndicate or some order or some cabal or someone who's getting this doomsday device, I thought we've just kind of seen enough of that. And I'm happy that this one kind of migrated away from the, hey, I've got to deactivate the bomb, or I've got to get this deadly bacteria or virus, you know, before it's released out. I'm happy that they kind of moved away from that and they moved to something that is I don't want to say it's realistic, but it's a more plausible, maybe kind of villain. So I kind of liked the first one. I think the complaints we had about the first one, which kind of seems like only yesterday that we did it, was we thought there was too much MacGuffin with this key. And that was a little bit much for me. But apart from that, I kind of liked the plot. I thought the train scene in that first one was fantastic. And of course, the dirt bike scene was, the star, but I thought that train scene was equally good. And I thought it was an overall fine movie. I thought this one was better, although I don't think it was a perfect movie. I thought that there were a lot of very, very good elements. One being that the key was much less prominent. On the downside, I thought that the entity had a much lesser role. And I was a little bit surprised that the entity was not using his control of all things electronic to try to, I thought he'd just send like a million drones, after Tom Cruise, and they'll all kind of like dive bomb into the water after him or something. I thought he'd kind of like try to get control of like all trains and smash them into each other, all airports, and try to like crash everything. Like I thought there was going to be more of that. And the entity actually had a very, very minor role. So I have to say, like, overall, I thought it was a very well-paced movie. I thought it was good action. The storyline at a high level made sense, although I think there was some little nits that we could probably pick on, but at a high level, I thought it made sense. And I thought it was I thought you got good value for your money, although definitely not a perfect film. From a character perspective, there were some very good farewells, right? Like Luther had a very respectful farewell. I mean, I think it was a little bit weird. I don't know why he needed to be hooked up to the bed, and I thought that was a little bit excessive, but I thought he had a very, very dignified farewell. And then, of course, he got the last word with a very nice monologue, in the recorded device, staying true to the Mission Impossible. This will self-destruct in 5 seconds. I wanted Simon Pegg to die, actually. Benji, I thought, was a very beloved character for a long time, starting from kind of Mission Impossible 4 or 5, I think is when he first began. And he was a fresh-faced, kind of deer in the headlights, good comedic sidekick. And now I find him to just be, to be honest, an old looking Irish man. Don't know if he's Irish. Doesn't really have, I just don't find that he adds anything. So I was kind of hoping that he would die and he would get like a nice respectful ending as well, but they kept him alive. I thought that the addition of Paris, again, I think Paris is a terrible agent. I'm volunteering publicly to be her agent. She is so pretty. They give her no lines whatsoever. And every line is one French word. I don't know why she can only speak French. This is not a French film. It's not even taking place in France, or a Francophone country. She says one line in French, and then someone who doesn't speak French, like Tom Cruise or Benji, has to respond to her and explain things in French. I find extraordinarily annoying, not adding anything to the movie at all. But she's super pretty, but she must have the dumbest agent in the world who cannot even get her a single line in English in this movie. Haley Atwell, fantastic. But again, at the end, I think you and I may agree, this was just a big open love letter to Tom Cruise.
And to the franchise.
And to the franchise.
So this goes back to what we were talking about. They've kind of poised this as the finale in the sequence. We're never going to see another Mission Impossible movie again.
Yeah.
I'm still skeptical, and the off chance that this movie makes like $1 billion this summer, I don't see that happening, that they don't make any more. But you can tell that this was a love letter to the franchise because they bring back the MacGuffin from Mission Impossible 3, right? With the rabbit's foot.
Yeah.
They bring back William Dunlow. They bring
Dunlow
back
nice.
all these other characters.
The montage on the VHS, right?
That's right.
President.
And then they talk about all the different missions that he's done in the past.
Yeah.
All right. So look, let's get this out of the way. I had lots of problems with this movie, and I'm kind of itching to get through.
Get there. Let's hear it. Don't hold back. Go.
First of all, let's talk about the bad guy. S.I. Morales. What a horrible, horrible, horrible bad guy. The issue I had in the last movie was, who the hell is this guy? Why is he out there? And they did this in the last movie. I hate when franchises bring up a character supposedly from the protagonist's past that we have no idea about, and he comes back and he's the bad guy. And everyone's like, oh, there's some deep emotional meaning behind. Well, Ethan had this guy as the bad guy from 50 years ago. Well, we never know this guy. We never knew who this guy was. Why the hell is he here? Second of all, how many nuclear bombs does this guy have?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're throwing these around like chiclets. They have one in London. They have one in South Africa. What? The world's all of a sudden just, you can go to a Walmart and pick up a nuclear bomb? That's not how these things work.
Even if you can, these are not small things where you can just like put it in your backpack and like.
So dumb. That opening scene where he knows that Ving Rhames is going to die. You're really going to run across all of London? Really? Tom Cruise? I get that this is a Tom Cruise movie, and I get that you want to show Tom Cruise sprinting. But come on, man. Like, you couldn't just steal a car and jump on a motorcycle, something like that. Instead, you're literally running across London Bridge. I live in London. He ran like 18 miles, and he was not out of breath. You know what I mean? Fine. Next. Sorry, this is going to go on for some time.
I'm ready.
Haley Atwell.
Yeah.
You met her literally 6 months ago in this. All of a sudden, she's like your best pal. She's supposed to be like this potential romantic kind of interest to you. Because of her, Rebecca Ferguson died. She literally left you handcuffed to a vehicle. She was going to kill you, and you're all of a sudden feeling so close to her. And likewise, she feels so close to you. Why? You already mentioned the same thing about Pom Klementieff. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
I'm putting this on the record. Your agent sucks. Call me. I've never been an agent. I cannot do worse. Why
is this guy Jim Phelps' son? Why is he related to Jim Phelps at all? Totally unnecessary. You know what they would have been better off doing? Bringing Jon Voight back. Dun, dun, dun. I think that would have been a way better twist. Hannah Waddingham, great actress. Totally underused. And then the president gives her one note that says May 22, 1996, and all of a sudden she's supposed to give up her entire aircraft carrier to this guy.
Do you not find it funny that sometimes she is undeniably British, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all respect for having a woman be an admiral of a ship. I think that's super cool, to be honest. And she is sexy, and honestly, she has the command that I would believe that she's an admiral, but she is undeniably British.
Yeah.
And to have an undeniably British blonde woman be an American admiral of an aircraft carrier is just...
It's absolutely bonkers. There are so many other A-tier female actors you could have found to do that. Then to underutilize her because she's such a good actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she literally stands there in a uniform and then gives up her ship.
Yeah.
That was her role. Let's talk about the AI. One, I agree with you. I thought that the focus or the reliance on the skeleton key or the shift away from that was an overall positive, that MacGuffin. We never really learned in the last movie why the AI decided it wanted to kill humanity. So why is it necessary that humanity had to die? No idea.
Yeah, we just take it as a given.
We just take it as face value, right?
Yeah.
And if you're an AI, leverage the AI, right? If you're this all-powerful AI that's able to take over the nuclear capabilities of all the countries, which, by the way, I have another massive issue. Why not just disconnect the internet switch? Like, I am 99.99% positive they could have pulled the plug at any given time for all these quote-unquote 8 countries that have nuclear weapons. Right? But instead, each one of them allows their nuclear arsenal to be completely taken over by this. It made no sense to me. But I think that would have been way cooler is if they had that final sequence in the biplane where you're also being strafed by predator drones.
Yeah. So I think there is, if I know you're on a roll, but I think there is one thing that really didn't make sense if we were going to be like the heads of common sense, that they did a horrible job of making a distinction between what is potentially computer connected and what is analog. And
Yeah.
I'm sure nuclear weapons are not in any way connected to the internet. Now, an easy way around that would be like, hey, I can control all these, I don't know, equipments or machines or robots that can drive caterpillars or something. And they're actually going to physically go and find the nukes and they're going to lift them up and they're going to like drop them or something, or satellites, or there's a better way to do it. But nukes, I agree, are absolutely offline. And by no definition, even if you control the world's internet, they're not connected as far as I'm aware, having no knowledge of nukes.
And then, by the way, at the end of the last movie, Jim Phelps, the kid, he actually kind of has a peaceful understanding with Tom Cruise. There was that scene where they kind of shake hands after the train heist, and he's like, this is, you saved my ass, I saved your ass, even Stevens. Right?
Even Stevens.
And now in this movie, it's his partner that becomes the friend. Why is Degas the guy who's his friend? Anyway, that's another thing. Finally, and this is the thing where, because you could tell this was like supposedly the final movie in the series, I think they gave Tom Cruise too much rope. I think they were just like, all right, this is going to be the final Mission Impossible movie, so let's make the stunts too over the top. Let's make everything happen too overly convoluted.
I didn't think the stunts were too over the top. I thought that, and I think that's the calling card of Mission Impossible, but I thought that there was too much. Tom Cruise is 62. He is in world-class shape for a 62-year-old.
Absolutely.
But I thought there was a little bit too much, hey, let's have him in a fight scene in his boxer shorts. Let's have him jog on a treadmill. All this was like to say, like, see how good of a shape he's in. We know it. I didn't think it needed to be so in my face, or I need to see him wrestling in his underwear to understand that the guy's in good shape for a 62.
When I say over the top, what I really mean is that biplane sequence was 10 minutes too long. They went a little too long with that. And then when I also say over the top, I mean unnecessarily convoluted. First of all, he's in the submarine after jumping off of a helicopter, okay, in the freezing cold water.
Yep.
Then he gets taken into that submarine. Then he has that naked fight with that guy. Then he has to go using an experimental prototype swimsuit to go down all the way into the second Russian submarine. Then he gets into the submarine. Then that submarine starts to tilt because, of course, it's on the edge of a cliff underwater. And then, of course, the submarine starts falling out. And then, of course, he has to eject himself out of a torpedo tube. And, of course, the first torpedo tube is full. The second torpedo tube is small. So he has to take off his swimsuit. You know what I mean? It's just like it was one thing after another. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong went wrong. And it was just unnecessary. Oh, he's on a biplane. He doesn't have a parachute. Then the biplane gets on fire. Then he finally succeeds and he's able to kill the guy. And by the way, the guy dies in such an unceremonious way. Then he jumps off of the plane. And then his parachute, oh, by the way, your parachute's on fire. Then he gets onto the second parachute. And instead of using the kill switch while he's on the parachute, he waits for the second parachute to deploy. Like, it's just overly engineered for.
Boy, you're really a harsh critic. I mean, it was.
I think that these things, I'm applying the same level of criticism to this that I do with the movies that we don't typically like, right?
Yeah.
And this felt like a lot of the tension was manufactured, but it was so artificially manufactured, it didn't feel right. Take yourself back 2 to 4 years ago. You remember Top Gun Maverick?
I do.
One of the most tense sequences in that movie wasn't even the last sequence when they're actually in Iran doing the mission. It was when he's on his own in the test simulator when he sets the time for 2:15.
Yeah.
That was a tense moment. That wasn't even the real mission. And that came off as more tense than anything we saw in this Mission Impossible movie. And the stakes were much lower in that because it was just a training simulator run versus this, where literally every move was connected to a bomb blow.
I think your points are well taken. I think they're a little bit.
Probably excessive. I apologize.
I think they're excessive considering that's a Mission Impossible movie. So a lot of this I think is not really a surprise and
Yeah.
probably applies to a
you're
lot
right.
of Mission Impossible movies.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
But I think the overall point is some of them I think are quite legitimate, which is it felt like for something that's such a big budget and the stakes are so high that some of it was just a little bit slopped together.
Yeah.
And I think we're expecting a little bit more in terms of more coherent kind of plot and characters. And it just felt like this was maybe like a writing by committee or studio head saying, we'll find a way to work this in. So you see it not really stitched up as tight as we want it to be.
Yeah.
But a lot of we could say the same thing. I mean, you talk about like running through London doesn't make sense. I mean, if you remember Mission Impossible, I'm going to say 4, it might have been 5, where he's on Burj Khalifa in Dubai.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then he's in Sharjah the next minute.
Yeah, I mean, geographically, for anyone who's been or lived in Dubai knows as well as Pete and I, that was bonkers, for a lot of reasons, so it's kind of part and parcel. Let's make a few good points. What about Tramwell Tillman as Captain Bledsoe, the captain of the sub?
Oh, man, I loved him.
There you go.
I loved him. I thought he was
I'm
great.
your man. You want to poke the bear? I'm your man.
Exactly. Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought he was great. Dunlow and his wife, right? The sled dogs, quite good.
I wasn't a huge fan of some of the things they were clearly trying to do was make a few jokes or some funny things.
Yeah.
Some of it didn't land for me.
Yeah.
But again, I think in general, I don't have high expectations for humor when it comes to a Mission Impossible series. They're not really known for it. They have had some jokes that have landed very well across the series, but it was fine.
How about Nick Offerman as General Sidney?
I mean, he was the classic red herring, right? Everyone thought that he was going to be the bad guy, and he ended up being the good guy.
Yep. Now, on a downside, and I totally agree with this, and I can't believe they got away with this. The weird chemistry between Cruise and Haley Atwell. Yeah. Like, if you want to make them romantic, but it was that thing in the hyperbaric chamber was beyond awkward.
Great. It was clearly just an excuse to get both of them half naked together.
I mean, it was, I mean, it made no sense. And I mean, and someone's like, Haley, just put your chest like right in the camera. You know, like it was unnecessary, but I thought, I know it's Tom Cruise now. And for whatever reason, Tom Cruise has such a big persona that he almost has become like asexual.
Yeah.
Right. Like he cannot kiss anyone on screen. I don't know why that's like it's not even an unwritten rule. It's like a written rule, but like that weird vibe that he had with Haley Atwell, they should have just made them platonic. They didn't need to make it so weird the way that it was,
especially because his love interest was in the last movie, which is a direct sequel to the prequel to this, and she died because of her.
I know. I thought they should have really toned that down. The cast was not bad, that the action was not bad. I liked the high level plot. I liked that they had, very much like Inception, they kind of had like 2 action sequences going on simultaneously. They had, Cruise underwater. And I liked that the sub started tipping because it made sense that once you open the hatches and water got in, it kind of shifted the balance. That I thought made sense. But I liked that they had kind of the underwater over water at the same time and they had to match up perfectly. I thought that was very reminiscent of kind of what we saw in Inception. Inception, I think, had like 3 different things going on at once. And I thought that was a really cool, I think they could have, to be honest, made that better. Right. I think they could have done a lot more with like the sled dogs going over the ice, with the GPS. Again, that's where it would have been great if the entity had sent like all these drones.
Yeah.
And like just started like dive bombing them. And they're like, look, we got to get to this coordinate in the next like 5 minutes or he's going to die. And they kind of like one went to the left and one went to the right to kind of, split the thing. And I thought there was a much more exciting way to do that scene.
100%. I really think they underutilized the AI aspect.
Yeah.
And I think they could have done it I could think they could have done it much better. In fact, I'm just thinking of it. Do you remember that awful movie with Jessica Biel? She's like an Air Force
Stealth.
pilot.
With Jamie Foxx and someone else that will
Yeah, and one of the aircrafts is run by an artificial intelligence, one of the jet planes.
Yeah.
I think that was a far better use of AI. Of course, it's a very specific use case, but that could have been something they fell upon. I really think that would have been better.
You're right. There could have been a more emotional climactic end where you could have saw the unnamed country that was analog was trying to take advantage of this thing, right? And then the AI kind of used its powers to kind of stop the annihilation of people. And the AI is like, hey, I wasn't trying to wipe out people. I was trying to save you by eliminating all your weapons. I was trying to, there could have been a more emotional climactic end where there's a third antagonist.
The AI aspect never sat right with me because we never got a full understanding of why the AI wanted to destroy humanity. And if that's what it wanted to do, it certainly was doing it in a very, let's say, inefficient way to do it. And again, look, I am no cyberneticist. I'm no computer scientist. I am no anything.
I'm just a man with a friend and a podcast.
Exactly. That's it. That's exactly right. And I can't help but feel like if it's already got access to the internet, which is still somehow weird that it got it from that submarine, why couldn't it just copy its code somewhere else? Why didn't it just copy its code into a satellite?
Look, that's a very good point. But I have to say the idea of this doomsday vault, I thought was a good point. I mean, it was kind of an interesting thought, which is, okay, why isn't he doing everything now? It's well, he needs a safe place. If he's going to wipe out everything in the world, he'll be wiped out as well. He needs a safe place. He realizes that the only safe place is this vault. He needs to, protect himself. I thought that was kind of cool, but you're right. You kind of easily debunk that by the satellite, unless someone would have done some exposition saying, well, if everything dies on Earth, then the satellite's ultimately going to crash and blah, blah, blah.
Again, I mean, how cool would it have been? And I somehow, this is right up Tom Cruise's alley. They had to go because the source code was left on, copied they somehow were able to get the kill switch. It's deleted everywhere except for this rogue satellite. So Tom Cruise has to get onto a spaceship, has to go into space, and has to destroy that satellite, or has to, manually disable that satellite.
All right, so here we go. This is now we're getting into something, right? Okay, we've talked about what's happened. We've got opinions. It's a movie that's got some flaws, but still a summer blockbuster.
100%.
Here's where I think two things are going to happen. At the end, it would have been great to do an end credit sequence where you show the International Space Station and you just show one flashing button. And an astronaut's hey, we're getting an incoming message on the secure channel. And then he pushes that blinking button. And it's oh, that's
and
weird.
The screen turns red or something.
Yes. One, that would have been a great end credit sequence. Two, I imagine since they've caught this thing in now a fancy thumb drive, that they're going to take...
By the way, also hilariously stupid, but okay.
No, but that was kind of a cool scene and it happened so fast. I will absolutely watch that scene again because it happened so fast. The green light, the thumb drive, and then she snatched it.
Yeah.
That was a very, very, almost too fast for cinema. If you blinked it, you missed it.
Yeah.
I would absolutely watch the movie, not the whole movie, but I would watch that scene again because that was super cool, how fast it went. I imagine that Tom Cruise is going to come back in 10 years. They're going to mothball this movie for 10 years. in 10 years, Cruz will be 72. He'll have lifetime achievement awards and everything. And they're going to have the next big thing, whoever that is, right? It'll be Justin Bieber, whoever else is like 12 years old right now, come and be the new IMF guy, right?
Right.
Cruz will be kind of like what he did for Maverick. Hey, we're calling you back. You've just been, skydiving and, flying planes for the last 10 years in retirement. We need you back. You're the only guy who remembers this thing. It'll be him, and Grace will make another return. And Palm still didn't learn English in 10 years. And they'll be like, you've got to help this new Ethan Hunt, right? It was supposed to be Jeremy Renner. He's out. It's supposed to be the new Ethan Hunt. And actually, this virus somehow has been stolen, or it's missing, or actually we found that it's dormant on the space station. And it will be a new Mission Impossible Final Reckoning again in 10 years. No way will the franchise die, but I think they've kind of put it in a place where the next writers, hopefully you and me, probably not, can take the material and we can come up with a suitable next chapter.
Yeah. I have spent the better part of a half hour crapping on the movie. And that's not to say that I think the movie was horrible. This is the quintessential Tom Cruise summer blockbuster. It's just, I think you're right. I have higher expectations. And especially after the success of Maverick and the letdown that was Dead Reckoning, I was hoping that this would be a way to right the ship. But unfortunately, I just found it to be more of the same swamp.
Yeah, but I think that's due to two things. One, it's the same director for the last three, right?
Yeah.
It's Christopher McQuarrie. And I think Cruise has become so big that now it's, when they're writing the story, it's about, okay, let's think about what are the set pieces. Let's do something with a biplane. And they're not making it like, they're not thinking about the story. They're just hopping from set piece to set piece.
100% agree. They're building it around the set pieces for sure.
Yeah.
I am almost certain that since the last movie, they had already decided there was going to be an action sequence that involved the submarine in this movie.
Yeah.
And in this movie, they had already decided, before they had even written the script, we're going to end on a biplane stunt.
Yeah, I agree. I think that whoever is the next director, and hopefully it's someone who brings a fresh perspective, they're like, look, we'll do one stunt with Cruise. Yeah. He'll be pushed off a building and he'll parachute and do something. We'll give him his credit, but it will be a more nuanced story and a little bit more Bondish, a little bit more rugged, and a little bit more like deep plot.
That, to me, is the right way to go. I think they need to go back to their earlier Mission Impossible movies, which was a lot less about the action sequence and a lot more about the actual mission being something. I don't want to say that this isn't an impossible mission. They're all impossible missions, but in the sense that they were a lot more cerebral. I mean, that was one of the great things about Mission Impossible 1. The most outlandish stunt was him hanging on a wire in a white room.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being on top of the TGV on the train and having a helicopter blade almost poke him in the eye as it explodes.
Yeah.
That seems almost childish compared to all the things that we've seen in the last 5 movies.
Yeah. They've made it an action franchise. They are jumping from set pieces. And I agree. If they could make a very nuanced next one, I think that'd be fantastic. I'd like to think it's gonna be 10 years. I don't think they can wait that long. I think it's gonna be more about like 5, and we'll see something. And Cruise will be, again, drawn out of retirement. There will be a new guy who's the new kind of like 007 Ethan Hunt, and it will be Cruise kind of mentoring him.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted Benji Simon Pegg to die only because I thought Luther got a good send off. Simon's obviously one of the longer standing characters as well. It would have been good to see him with a swan song to give him kind of like his due respect, but he's outlived his.
Yeah, I mean, he was always like the Mission Impossible version of Q, right? He was always the guy who was giving them the gadgets.
But he was also, at the beginning, he was the wide-eyed kind of like goofy.
Yeah, he was never a field agent. That's exactly right.
Now he's he's just older, and he can't pull that young intern vibe off anymore.
No,
And
certainly not.
he doesn't have the physical creds to be like a proper gun-toting, punching kind of guy,
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I don't want I don't want people, and I don't want our listeners to think that I think this was a horrible movie. And there were certainly moments in the theater where I was just like, come on. Like even for me, this was a bridge too far. But having said that, you got to give the guy his dues. He's 63 years old. This is theoretically the swan song. So yeah, they gave him a
Yeah.
little too much rope.
Yeah.
But if there's one actor or one franchise that allowed to have that kind of rope, it's him.
Yeah. I thought the supporting actors, Janet McTeer, Nick Offerman, Hada Waddingham, Captain Bledsoe, Trammell Tillman, Angela Bassett was a very good American president, right? Donlow. I thought those supporting actors were fantastic. Ving Rhames is gone in a blaze of glory. Isai Morales, I think we're a little bit sick of. Same thing with Kittredge, same thing with Sterling or Serling, whatever. Could have been improved a little bit, but generally not as bad as I think were maybe made it to believe. But it's definitely not a classic movie. It's not a classic like 4 or 5, Ghost Protocol. I think that it's still a very, very good movie. A little bit too much ode to Tom Cruise in it.
I agree. What do you give this as a rating?
I mean, I definitely give it I'm going to say wait for streaming. It hurts me to say that. In terms of a summer blockbuster popcorn munching movie, it ticks all those boxes. Go see it on the IMAX. It's not a waste of money, but in terms of are you going to be missing anything to discuss at the water cooler? Are there any huge spoilers that you have to see before you read about them or hear about them? No. There's no good spoiler. There's no good reveal. There's nothing dramatic that any of your friends would tell you that is going to spoil the movie for you. So I think for those reasons, I would say wait for streaming.
I am with you. I think Mission Impossible, for me, as a franchise, falls into the action genre. And when you look at action movies, generally speaking, you're not really there for the plot, you're there for the action.
Yeah.
And in certain cases, there are certain things that you have to see in the cinema because the effects are fantastic. The sound effects, the visual effects, all of that make you say, hey, listen, this is a water cooler moment in so much as you'll never be able to emulate what you see in the big screen as you would at home.
That's right.
Whether it's him dangling from 2 wires in a white room, or it's him skydiving and saving Henry Cavill at the last possible second, or anything like that.
Yeah.
This had, in my opinion, 2 strong stunt sequences. The first was the submarine, the second was the biplane.
Yeah.
And in my humble opinion, neither of those were strong enough where you have to go see it in the cinema. So I would say wait for this movie to come out on streaming. It's a direct sequel to a movie that, I mean, based on box office, you probably didn't see 2 years ago anyway. So let's, again, we didn't talk about it, but like the first 25 minutes of the movie was them doing so much exposition work. I think it's because they recognized that a lot of people may not have seen the first film. So I would recommend hold your horses, wait for it to hit one of the streaming networks.
All right, Pete, let's read off our YouTube credits and all that social media jazz so people can write to us and complain, agree, disagree, comments.
All right, DM us on
feedback,
Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast. And as always, leave a comment below, like this video, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to our channel.
Could not have said it better myself. Listeners, thank you for tuning in for Films and Stuff discussion of Mission Impossible Last Reckoning. Pete, as always, but today you take a back seat to me because Ethan Hunt is my namesake. I think we had a good discussion about this.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ethan.
All right. Have a good day now. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.